So Lauren, thank you so much for being on the show. And when I first heard your story, I was definitely, it hit a string in me because you have this, incredible story of coming from adversity and unhealthy state and disease into a place where you're helping so many others right now. You're healthy yourself. But what really struck me is how young you were when this all started. And I have lots of guests on that sort of say maybe it started when I was a teenager, or, in my early years, but I was somewhat healthy as a child, they say. And your story really started at 2 years old. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was diagnosed with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis a month before my second birthday.
And tell me, because you probably don't have many memories of 2 years old. I know I don't, but tell me what you can kind of share with us as far as what were your parents told as to why, what your parents told as to what would be your upbringing, how things would be. What was that sort of, that early age? What was provided to you and your parents from the medical side?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's kind of usually where I start the story because it lays the foundations for the rest of the story. So I was diagnosed just before my second birthday, and it was following the measles rubella vaccine. So I had the vaccine, it was 1986. So it was 2 years before the MMR was released in the UK. And straight after I got a virus. And then from that virus, my ankles swelled up and then my knee swelled up. And then I was diagnosed, and the doctors, the top pediatric rheumatologists at the time, were saying that the best way to knock it on the head, quote unquote, was with really, really high doses of oral steroids.
Mm,
So, 2-year-olds being
2 year old.
pumped full of these high doses of oral steroids, that was what they thought at the time was the best way to treat this. And I was actually it was just an NHS, the NHS, the National Health Service. We don't pay for it. But I happened to be under one of the top pediatric rheumatologists in the country, in the UK, in London. And this was kind of her doing. She was the one that had advised this route. Now, my parents, who were both left school at 15, had no education in anything, let alone natural health. My mum just had this niggle, and she went to the library. She took herself to the library to read what are steroids, what is arthritis doing. This was informed choice in 1986, taking herself to the library. And I don't know why she did it, and she doesn't know. She just knows she was intuitively guided. And that has been my life savior because that really has laid the foundation for everything I've done now. And she decided that no, she wasn't going to allow this into her 2-year-old. And so she told the doctors that she was going to find another route. And they told her she was a bad mother, and she was really pressured. And even my dad and my grandparents were spiritualists, interestingly. So, I was taken to spiritual healers and all this. So all that stuff was always normal for me. But even so, there was fear. These authoritative figures sitting there saying, well, Mrs. Vaknine, this is the wrong decision. Her joints are going, and this was what they said. Her joints will be damaged and she'll end up needing a lot of joint replacements if you don't put her on these steroids. Now, the interesting and very ironic thing that I saw as I grew up, so my parents then kind of intuitively decided on homeopathy, and homeopathy and herbs was how I was treated, along with kind of the spiritual healing. And yeah. And so I was part of this physio group of children around my age, but, varying kind of age ranges around my age throughout my childhood, the same group. And though I wasn't as I was noticeably different to my school friends. I was, more slowed down, and sometimes I had to sit on a chair in assembly, and I couldn't go to some of the, heavy, running parties and stuff like that. Next to the kids in the physio group, I was really noticeably different. So a lot of them were not growing properly. They were short. It was like their limbs weren't growing properly. So their limbs looked shorter. And obviously when you're on steroids, you get that kind of puffy face. They started getting joint damage. They started having joint replacements. The girls weren't getting their periods. And I was growing and growing, and everything was happening normally in my body. Now, I wasn't in remission. And I know now that that's because we didn't have all the missing pieces. It was the 80s and the 90s. There was no internet. And my parents really did the best they could with what they had. But that was what that was the extent of what they had. And they also didn't have very much money to keep exploring options. And, homeopathy was expensive, and they kept at it, and they really poured everything they had into it. But we didn't yet kind of know the diet aspect and all the lifestyle aspects of it. So, we ate, from my parents are kind of, Mediterranean, and we ate that sort of diet, but there were Diet Cokes, and there were chocolates, and there was, cordials with aspartame. I now know it to be aspartame, and and so I think that was because everything is so multifaceted. And so the homeopathy was helping to keep my body strong. And my immune system was strong. I wasn't coming down with every illness that all the other kids with arthritis were coming down with. My immune system was strong, and I looked normal. And however, there may be some people, I don't think there will, but there may be some people that see that as a superficial thing. But as a child growing up, all your limiting beliefs are predicated on how other people see you and how other people treat you because of that. And so for me, that was a huge thing, that I looked normal, especially in my teenage years. And so that was kind of how it went in that respect with the doctors. And they kept telling regardless of seeing how I was growing and I had no joint deformities and the rest of it, they kept on. I did have to have injected steroids injected into the knees and ankles, because when I had really bad flare-ups, and there were a lot, my parents didn't know what to do, how to move me. My knees would literally be like, there was no bending, and so they would drain the knees and the ankles and inject steroid. And I was also diagnosed with a condition in my eye, an inflammatory condition called uveitis, which is connected with the arthritis. I was diagnosed with that at 3. And my mum was just too scared to not use the steroid eye drops. Because with the joints, we could see what was happening. If I was having a flare up, we could see it, I could feel it. With the eye, we didn't always know. It was only kind of when you looked into the machine and they would say, she's got a lot of cells, there's a lot of inflammation, the pressure's low. And that was really scary for my parents. And so I went through that. I had a lot of steroid injections into the eye. So that was a lot of trauma that I've had to work through subsequently in the years, because, that was, I was really young. So there was that factor as well, that I wasn't free of steroids. But the doctors always said to my parents, no, don't worry. The injected ones don't enter the body in the same way. It won't really kind of live in the body. It will just come out. Obviously, we now know that to not be true. And so I think that had a big impact as well. But essentially, they were guided very much towards the steroids. They made a decision for themselves. But what actually happened was 15 years later, this pediatric rheumatologist who had suggested the very high doses of steroids apologized, saying that it was the wrong decision because she could now see the secondary illnesses and side effects that all these children had had. And I'm now 37. And I, over the years, went back to the hospital and saw these people. Some of them died. And it's never the arthritis that kills, it's the medications, the secondary conditions that come as a result of the medications. And most of them are just completely immobile. And that's my experience of seeing firsthand that my mum just had this niggle. She just knew that it wasn't okay. And she followed that. And obviously there's a lot more to the journey, because things got really bad after that. But essentially that was what set me up.
I mean, a mother's intuition is something else, I always say. A woman's intuition alone is way better than a man's. I think that's settled. But, in this modern day age, we put aside intuition and we listen to the experts, quote unquote, right, and the doctors, and we put all our trust into them. And as you saw yourself, I mean, I'm actually a little bit shocked that this doctor would admit that 15 years later. But this is the truth of medicine right now, even we're happening right now in modern medicine. In 15 years, we may look back and say, no, that was not the best course. And unfortunately, that oops is a big deal. That's life or death in many, and severe suffering for young children. Now, I love to hear that your parents were in some ways renegades and didn't go fully in on just all these steroids. And you saw the results of some of these and people that aren't here anymore 15 years or 20 years later. But what were they told? What were your parents told as to why a 2-year-old would develop JRA diagnosis?
Oh, it's just genetic.
Genetic, right?
It's just genetic.
That's the go-to.
Yeah. It's the go-to for everything, right? It's just, actually, it was hereditary. That was the word.
Yes,
it's
genetics weren't as
hereditary.
big back then. It was hereditary, yes.
And I don't think my mum actually understood. And I always say my dad was present as well, but I always say my mum, because she was kind of the one that took control of it. And my dad just, really was just emotional about it all and couldn't really make any decisions. But my mum always says, yeah, they said it was hereditary, not genetic. And I grew up hearing that and kind of not knowing, well, what's the difference? And there was no awareness of epigenetics or understanding that lifestyle played played a role in any way. No one made the connection between, I have the medical records now, there's a direct correlation between the vaccine, the virus, and the joint swelling. But no one ever made the correlation.
To this day, aside from yourself, has anyone sort of made that correlation looking back? Let's say this other doctor 15 years later, the one who put you on these steroids and said that would have been that, I'm glad you didn't. That was wrong. I admit that. I see that now. Would that doctor, if you show the steroids, or maybe you have showed these results and the records, would they show any correlation that the vaccine might have been the cause of your juvenile rheumatoid arthritis?
No, I've heard the word coincidence so many times.
Right.
I don't really have much contact with conventional doctors anymore. That specific rheumatologist, she passed away a long time ago. The one I was with her from the age of 2 until the age of 4, and then I was passed on to another rheumatologist who took care of me from 4 until 18, when I left her because of the medication that she'd put me on that we can get onto that nearly killed me. But even so I contacted her in recent years because I held so much resentment towards what I felt she had done, but also to say that not everything is about statistics and not everything is about, there is so much more to it. And she kind of apologized actually, but wasn't able to, she didn't make any correlations or agree that, she just kind of gave me the scientific lingo of what she, it was just very much bypassing what I'd suggested.
I mean, I know that doctors are in some ways made to kind of disconnect from that emotional experience side of a patient and the evidence, the clinical research, and to be very, logistic like. And it makes it difficult, I think, for a doctor to really admit that, even when it is a little bit blatant in certain circumstances, not to say across the board. Everyone has a different, unique one. Your experience, though, and everything you started at such a young age and went through, I mean, you can't discount the experience, is what I'm saying. And your experience was one that I think was very, blatant in many ways. And you saw the differences of the choices your parents made versus the apologies years later, and all the correlation and connecting the dots isn't too difficult in some cases. Coincidences, I understand coincidence, but in many ways there is a ABC to this all that sort of makes sense. And in your case, it seems to be that way. Now, you have this, childhood where you're struggling. You have these injections. You're kind of, balancing out, I would say, somewhat maybe with the homeopathy there that is able to keep you somewhere. But what was, let's say, your teenage years going into young adulthood? What did that look like?
Right. So that's where everything really changed. So my teenage years, my high school years were my best years. I had 4 really good years where I was super healthy. I had maybe 1 flare up a year, but very manageable, to the point that my husband and I, we were in the same class in school together. We only got together years later, but he didn't know that I had arthritis. So that's how well I was. Whereas when I was in primary school, all the kids in my primary school, if I ever meet them now, they always go, "How's your arthritis?" It was a big thing then. So I got through high school, which was great because those years are really difficult years as it is without having a disability. And I left school to go to performing arts school, and everything changed. It seems like out of nowhere. I just got a huge flare up, both in the joints and the eye. And I stopped having the mobility that I'd had since I was kind of 12. Obviously I had the flare ups, but generally I'd had this mobility, and the rheumatologist was saying, it's burning itself out, which it can do at adolescence. And so it came back, and the big concern was the eye. So my ophthalmologist, who I had been with since I was 2, said, "You're growing cataract over cataract over cataract, and it's pushing against the optic nerve." And so the pressure had dropped to 0, and pressure should be something between kind of 13 to 20, something like that. And there was so much inflammation in the eye. So it was a catch-22, because she said, "We can't operate to remove these cataracts and take and increase the pressure while there's that much inflammatory activity in the eye." Now, what was it that caused those cataracts? It was the steroid eye drops. They said, well, it could be a combination between the eye drops and the inflammation. But so she said to me, and my joints were flaring at the same time, and I was just kind of embarking on this new life, and I was applying to universities, and I was a young adult, and things were like going well until they just stopped going well, literally overnight. And so she'd said to me, alongside my rheumatologist, "We have to operate on this eye. We have to do this operation because you could lose your eye if we don't." And there was a valid, I could have done. There was so much going on in that eye, with the pressure being so low, pushing against the optic nerve. It was very scary. And I was 17. And she said, "We need you to go on methotrexate," which, for those listening, is a chemo-based drug, which they give alongside folic acid, synthetic folic acid, which anyone who knows about MTHFR, which I didn't at the time, will know that that is the perfect storm. So I said to my parents, "Well, I'm an adult now. And, what has the homeopathy done? It's obviously done nothing. Look at me. I'm in this situation." Because, I was that teenager. And I'm gonna take the drug. Like, what the other stuff hasn't worked. And when this kind of started, between the time that this started and actually taking the drug, I knew that this kind of disability was looming. And so I did everything I possibly could to rebel and try and escape.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was just like the years of all of it building up until this point of, wow, what sort of childhood have I had, and what has happened here, and what's going to happen to me? And so I started doing drugs, and I just rebelled, and I got in with a bad crowd. And then there were many traumas that happened because of that I subsequently have spent years working through. And that probably sped up the process of the disease getting worse and worse, until the point that I couldn't function anymore, and I was too sick, and I decided to do the drug, the methotrexate. So within 3 months of taking the methotrexate, I was really ill. I mean, I could not function. I couldn't get out of bed. I was feeling sick. I had ulcers all over my body. Like, it was as if someone had taken some sort of machine that takes energy out of you, and the energy was removed from my body. I was just not operating optimally, and I mean, far from optimally. And then within 10 months, where I had started with arthritis in 4 joints, the knees and the ankles, within 10 months of being on methotrexate, the arthritis was in every joint in my body. So from my jaw right down to my toes. And I couldn't feed myself because I couldn't bend my elbows to get to my mouth or grip cutlery. I couldn't chew food because my jaw was too stiff. And I couldn't even sit up straight because my hips were too stiff. So I was just lying in bed, kind of at an obtuse angle, until someone would come in and move me and feed me and take me to the toilet. And that I was 18. And so that, yeah. But the irony of it is that after 10 months of taking methotrexate, the eye was no better at all. So they still couldn't operate. And my mum wheeled me into the rheumatologist, this one I'd been with since I was 4. And she didn't bat an eyelid at me being in a wheelchair. And I was obviously, 18 years old with all this pent up anger and frustration. And I was sad. And she didn't even look twice. And she'd been seeing me since I was 4. And she called me Laura instead of Lauren. And I lost it. Because she then went on to say, well, methotrexate works for 70% of people, for 30% it doesn't. And I just lost it. I said, I'm not a statistic, and I'm not going to be treated as one. I was 18 and I had no idea how the human body worked, or how pharmaceuticals worked, or why any of this was happening yet. But something in me did know that there is so much more to how the human body works, and how the human body adjusts to allopathic medicine than statistics. I knew there was a lot more to it than that. And so I left her office and never went back there again. Yeah. So that was, that was that part of the story.
I mean, it's really heartbreaking to hear that. And, it's one of the things that I've always said, being in medicine, one of the things I'd love to change about medicine is to humanize it again. That idea when you walk in to not budget, at all and just see someone suffering and just spit out statistics at someone
Right.
who's truly in agony and not even humanize, show no emotion or anything. And again, I kind of understand that doctors need to disconnect in some ways and not get over involved. But everyone's a human here. You should be treated personally and with some humanity and some emotion, and understand that what someone's going through. Have some empathy as a doctor. That's how you build trust. If you treat everyone as a machine as a doctor, I think that's why you look at how people kind of, and I have to say, I don't even know why most people trust doctors anymore. We should have lost a lot of trust for them, but we don't have a lot of respect anymore. Also, I have to say, for doctors, and in some ways they did that to themselves, right?
For me, it was just like, it's as if a person's experience just isn't valid because it wasn't recorded in a lab as a scientific study. And that's what gets to me. Empirical evidence is still evidence. If someone has undergone something and experienced something, that has happened. That is a fact. And if there are a series of events that lead up to that can show some correlation between what's happening, for example, from the age of 2 to the age of 18, or let's say 17, when I started the drug, I had arthritis in only 4 joints. Within 10 months of taking the drug, it was all over my body. Now, that wasn't recorded as a scientific study in a lab, but that doesn't make it any less valid that is a truth.
Absolutely. And to show some humanity to that, and even say that was about, like, what can we do now, and not to spit a statistic that I was right. 70% showed that you should have gotten better. You're in the 30, but I did my job. Right. And it's almost this flippancy as to, I did the right thing, and sorry, you're in a wheelchair, but we'll go on to the next drug. And that showed 60% efficacy, and maybe you'll be in the 40% that gets even worse. And no one wants to hear that again. And especially when, you could probably fast forward and look back and say, we had so many other options here, and we went to this one. And I was even speaking with someone yesterday about this, about how medicine's a little bit backwards. It's, if you get a little bit of pain, let's put you on a highly addictive, very, tons of side effect drug, or let's cut you open and work on your spine, which my father used to be in spinal surgery, and said it's incredibly low, success rate, and the amount of people that get worse after it. Why wouldn't you try chiropractic, acupuncture, emotional treatment, a whole list
emotional treatment,
of things before you get to the really toxic drug there?
Right. No one looked at me at 18 and said, wow, you've been through a lot of trauma.
And especially
for
for someone so young that bounced back. You said you were doing well. And of course you're going to have ups and downs in the healing journey. That is a lifelong journey, I say, regardless of where you are on it. And why not be able to go there? But unfortunately, you had this experience, and it's your experience for a reason. But you're now at this place where you're probably pretty frustrated with conventional medicine, but you're still only a teenager, right? You're in a wheelchair now. You're very probably desperate and in this state of kind of not knowing what to do, and confused and fearful. What happened next in your story?
Right. So at that point, I kind of saw what my mum had been saying all those years. The homeopathy had kept you healthy. None of this stuff happened before, Lauren. You weren't in remission. We haven't found all the answers yet. But my mum had this, she's this amazing human being. And she's always had this belief that I would get better. And I like to call myself an optimistic person, but not a positive person naturally. Right. So I'm optimistic, but in those situations, and I think maybe that's coming from having a childhood of having an illness and all that went with that, with all the injections and all, there was a lot of trauma there. So perhaps it's to do with that. But I used to say, what are you talking about, Mum? I've never been without arthritis. What makes you believe I will? Like, where are you pulling this from? And I used to get angry with her, and she never had, there was not one piece of doubt in her that I wouldn't get better. And I don't know where she got that strength. I honestly don't know where she got it from. But she was intuitively guided, and she still is to this day. And, it's because of her that I was able to overcome all of this. But this was the point that I kind of cut the umbilical cord, and I had to start taking responsibility. It was my job now. So I, my family is from Israel, and we heard of a treatment in Israel, a doctor there, a holistic doctor who was an MD as well, but he trained in Chinese medicine. And he had this therapy called IPEC therapy, where it integrates 7 different types of holistic therapies into one. And I went there and I stayed with family, and within 5 months, I was better. I mean, it looked like a miracle. The issue was that he was saying to me, you're going to have to come back for maintenance treatments. My parents literally had to take out a loan to get me there and to pay for these treatments and have me stay in Israel for 5 months. It was great. I came back, but I had all this I was 20 now, and my friends were all either finishing university or going traveling. I was supposed to have gone to university, and I missed out on all of that. And so I was like, well, I'm going to work and I'm going to party and I'm going to make up for those years that I've lost. And that's what I did. And then, like with a vengeance, the arthritis came back a year later. That was the best thing that ever happened to me, because that was the point that I realized at 21 years old, oh, no one's going to do this for me. I have to do it myself. I have to take ownership of my health and responsibility for my own well-being, because no amount of maintenance treatments, even if I was to go back and forward to Israel, are going to work if I'm not taking ownership of my body and making the decisions and knowing and being intuitively guided by my higher self to know what my body needs. And so it was at that point that I said, right, okay, I'm going to do this. And so I mean, the journey with that doctor in Israel, which kind of started when I was 19, well, it did start when I was 19. That was my initiation into that. And I started meditating just before I went there, just after the methotrexate, when everything was really bad, because that was like, what else can I do now apart from try and find some sort of spiritual connection? And I started learning how to meditate. So that the meditation was kind of my initiation. And then the doctor in Israel teaching me about, all these integrative therapies. And obviously I'd always been with homeopaths and herbalists, but really teaching me about the body. But I had to go through that. I had to come back and have that anger and start partying and doing all of that stuff. And then, but that was the point where I said, right, it's back. I feel shitty about it, but I am going to do this. And so I immersed myself in intensive self-study for a decade. And it wasn't like I did that and then I went into remission at all. It was a really long journey, but it was good because it kind of went like that. It was a steady, gradual, and there were ebbs and flows. There were times I would get a bit better and then a bit worse, until I had found all the missing pieces and fitted them together. And I'm talking epigenetics and studying that and how that played a part. Neuroplasticity, what part was my brain playing? Repressed emotions, emotional intelligence, allopathic medicine, how does the pharmaceutical industry work? How has that been affecting me? Everything, inner child healing, and learning to move into a place of self-love and self-acceptance, and pretty much just everything that you could do, as well as kind of moving into a place of purpose and knowing why I was here and why this had all happened to me. And when kind of we were able to fit all those pieces together, as well as biological dentistry, I think played a part. And there is so much within holistic healthcare, and so much that, with my children now, it's like, if I can try and not make all those mistakes in the first place, then maybe there won't be so much healing to do, So at 29, I went into remission, which was 8 years ago now. And I've been in remission ever since. And I did have flare-ups when I had each of my children. The hormones and the hormonal impact and the breastfeeding and the exhaustion, which again, although was not fun at all, was another great lesson in understanding that an autoimmune disease, once it's been triggered, once you've had that autoimmune response triggered by whichever stressor is going to trigger it, it's there, it's dormant in your body, and it's up to you to decide how you manage that. So an autoimmune disease is yes, you can go into remission, and I've been in a state of homeostasis for a long time, but if I don't keep working at it and I don't maintain this level of health, it will come back. And I don't live my life by that negative thought of, if I don't do this, it will come back. but my health is my priority, and health comes before everything for me.
Yeah, I mean, there's this beautiful moment, and you articulated it in every patient's journey, where you realize that no one else is going to heal for you. No one
Mm.
else is going to do that work. They could serve as guides, as coaches, as inspirational people, as catalysts in it all. That's fine. But it is your responsibility to heal and stay healthy. And for many, that is scary, right? That is, wow, that's so, look at me now. How do I get out? Oh my God, like this is on me, but it's also the moment of most empowerment because you
Oh,
have
yeah.
the ability to heal yourself. Whereas most doctors in a conventional realm would tell you, no, you do not. You need to be on these drugs for the rest of your life and manage your disease. And the irony of that all is what I say, it becomes a vicious disease cycle. You take the medication, it gets you sick and depressed. You get depressed, therefore you have no purpose in life. You have no purpose. The biochemistry goes down. You get another symptom. They give you another drug, and it goes in this circle of mind, body, spirit just goes downward instead of evolving upward. So I know you call it sick care system.
Yes.
And
I do. It's
and
not a
and I mean,
healthcare system.
you've been in it for a while, but can you explain that, even aside from your own experience, what you've seen now working with so many other people's, when you look back on it, you look at it now, why do you think this is a sick care system, not a healthcare?
I mean, you've just articulated it beautifully yourself, but it is. It kind of it's just kind of initiating more sickness. It's not calling for wellness. Like, there are some instances where medications are needed. In my personal opinion, there are very few where it's really needed. Where we excel is emergency care and neonatal care. That's really kind of where we excel. Aside from that, most of the chronic conditions we have and that we are getting are preventable. So, for those who don't want to work towards preventing it, yes, medication is going to be the best thing for you, because if you don't want to work towards preventing it, you're going to be unlikely to want to work to get rid of it, because there's a lot of work involved. Um, and so it just perpetuates a cycle. And I don't ever see anyone that goes down that cycle kind of, they're not in a state of wellness. Wellness is when all the parts of your physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual are in symbiosis, are working in symbiosis. And when one is out of balance, and this is, I say this and I use this in my course, I teach this to my clients. It's like the analogy of a 16-wheeler lorry. And if one of those wheels goes flat, for example, you've got 15 other wheels, and yet the lorry will still not get very far. The warning light will come on, and eventually you will have to stop. And you can carry on driving with 15 wheels if you want, but it's not going to be very safe, and you're not going to end up in a very good place. And our bodies are the same. We're not just kind of these linear beings made up of a series of different parts, all working in isolation. We're a being that is made up of a body, mind, and spirit. And those things all have to work together in symbiosis in order for healing to take place. And healing could mean anything for people. It could mean healing from an autoimmune disease. It could mean healing from a negative mindset. Healing is anything, is getting yourself to a state of health and wellness. And in order to get there, we really have to take the whole person into account. And the medical system, the medical model as it's set up, does not do that. It does not take the whole person into account. You've got a stomach problem. Oh, you go see a gastroenterologist. Or now your heart's bothering you. You go see a cardiologist. Oh, you're getting migraines. You go see a neurologist. Are any of those ologists speaking to each other? No. Is there any kind of connection? Is any one of them speaking about, well, it could be that medication is what caused that in the first place? Or, let's look at your nutrition. Why don't we do that? Or let's look at I'm a big fan of Dr. John Sarno and his books about repressed emotions, and sit down and journal. It sounds so simple, but I think one of the problems with the medical system is they expect everything needs to be complex. Everything needs to be in a scientific paper first. If it's not in the Lancet, we don't really understand it. We're not going. But actually, it's really simple. If you just give the body what it needs and you fuel the body with the things that are going to help it to thrive, your body is going to thrive.
Yeah.
That's all there is to it.
No, it's beautifully said. And I agree with you that, health is really actually quite simple. It's taking care
Mm.
of yourself in those ways. It's expressing yourself. It's doing things that are incredibly, are free to us, being out in nature, connecting with others, all these pieces. Why do you think that so many of us, though, have completely disregarded it? Because I agree with you. I think more doctors, real doctors, those ologists that you talked about, should be prescribing, you should be journaling, you should be
Right.
meditating. You should be just speaking with people that bring you joy and doing things that bring you joy. And I don't hear none of them, basically. Maybe a few here and there that are outcasts in their kind of
Well, that's the
field
thing. Yeah.
are
And I
saying
think
that. But why is that? Why can't a doctor just say, I still believe in drugs. That's okay. But also, why wouldn't I try this out as well? What is the worst that could happen if I tell someone, even if I put them on a low dose, why don't you also try? So maybe we could get you off of this too, because we don't want you on this for the rest of your life.
there are some doctors like that. I
There
had a
are.
rheumatologist when I left that awful rheumatologist after methotrexate. I was fortunate enough to meet one that was the most amazing man, Andrew Keat. Got to give him a word there. He was incredible, and he was so supportive of my journey and how I wanted to play it. And he agreed with me about, how the system wasn't working, but that was all he had to offer. But he would support me in my journey. So I'm always a fan of have the diagnostics, get a diagnosis, and then kind of go and deal with it yourself. So he would, do the scans and all those kind of things that I needed. And when I started getting better, and I remember once it was summer, I was in my early 20s, I was young. I was planning on going out to meet some friends after my appointment. And I was wearing like a denim skirt, a short denim skirt. And he said, Lauren, you carry on doing whatever it is that enables you to walk in here wearing a denim skirt in the summer, because none of my other patients of your age with arthritis can do that. He was amazing. So I think there are some doctors, but they are few and far between. I mean, in my experience, it's like the smallest percentage. And most doctors, and this is the thing, I kind of always feel like I'm the one that comes out of a hospital appointment or a doctor's appointment having something bad to say. But I think it's because I'm coming at it now with the experience of knowing that there are other options. And when you walk into a doctor's surgery and there is a possibility that you know more about something than they do, they don't like that. In the same way that if when, I had my children and doctors were questioning why I wasn't vaccinating, and I would ask them, well, can you name me 5 ingredients in that vaccine and 5 of the listed side effects? And they would look at me blank, and I would say, well, I can. So if you can't, then I must be in a better position to make this decision for my child than you are. But I think a lot of it comes down to fear. And we've seen from the past year, year and a half, how easy it is to brainwash a population when they're in a state of fear. And so I think that with doctors, we see the doctors who are speaking out, we see the whistleblowers, and we see what ends up happening with them. And so most doctors are scared to go down that rabbit hole. And I also think there is an element of believing that they have been to medical school. They are as high as it comes now. No one is above them in terms of what they know and their knowledge. But essentially, it's my belief that what they're learning in medical school is probably being kind of filtered down by who's up there, pharmaceutical industry. And what they're learning is from a textbook, essentially. And once there are some great doctors who go and do lots of research and they look into other things. And I recently met someone who is a rheumatologist, but he decided to go to China and study Chinese medicine. And I have a lot of respect for. He's still studying and practicing conventionally, but because he made the effort to go and see and learn more about the human body and about other methods, I have a lot of respect for him. But I think essentially, once you get into that world of believing that everything that you need to know is coming from a textbook, and then they don't really go and research. When I started telling my rheumatologists about MTHFR, and hold on, there's a connection here between folic acid, forget even the chemo that you gave me that made my hair fall out and damaged my liver and left me sick and disabled. Let's forget about that for a moment. Let's think about what the folic acid was doing to me when I have MTHFR. 70% of the population is said to have MTHFR. We can't methylate. We cannot absorb things like folic acid or B12 in the synthetic form. We need them in the methylated form. Now, someone comes and tells you that, and you just say, no, that's just rubbish. Where did you get that information from? And do you know how many times I've heard that, Casper? Where did you get that from? Like talking to me like I'm a child, but because I haven't been to medical school, I must not have enough knowledge or as much as them, even though I'm coming to them with information that they've never heard. And so I can't answer your question. I don't know why it's like that. I think it's an element of fear. I just think it's the way that the industry is. And we know that industries that are run by massive corporations that are earning loads of money, unfortunately, there is a kind of a method to how things happen there. And the only time I ever see long-term remissions, long-term remissions are when people step outside of that model.
Mm. Let me give, because everything you said, I feel like really connected. And it is probably part of the reason that we're stuck in this model, even though people aren't improving in it. And we're seeing actually worse results year after year. I mean, we used to be, our clinic, NYCM, used to be in Manhattan, just down the block from MSK, Memorial Sloan Kettering, the best, oncologists in the world, the best cancer care in the world. And a lot of the patients that would go in there would be maybe stage 4 or later. And a lot of the times when the doctors there didn't really have anything for them, they would come to our center as a last chance, because what else? The doctors there said, listen, nothing here, not even experimental, would work for you right now. It's too far in remission. Get your things in order. You have a few months to live. And they would come to our center. And we may see things a little bit differently. Understanding the realistic aspect would not you be back in healthy in a year. But what about supporting you? What about living with some extra years to you in a state of somewhat, general well-being, while still trying to fight this and still trying to do something? There's so much you could do for your organs, even if they are completely, cancerous. And so we saw, actually, there was one patient, at that time, I remember, because I was working there and I was at the front desk, and this patient came in with this prognosis of 3 months, and she said, the only thing I don't want to live forever, get rid. I just want to be around for my grandchildren and go on some vacations with them. And the grandchildren were young. She said, if you could do that, that would be the world. And we use insulin potentiation therapy, lots of things to support her, vitamin infusions, emotional things. She had problems with her children and had a lot of resentment over what happened in the family. So a lot of psychological and psycho-emotional therapies. She got much better. And she started traveling with her children. And then she went to her oncologist about a year later after the 3-month prognosis. And the oncologists were, of course, incredibly surprised. Took all, x-rays and scans and said, my God, you look so much better. Like what, And she told them about what she would do. And they said, you know what? This is actually fabulous news, because we now can put you on a trial with a new drug and we could help you now. And even though we were helping
now I'm healthy,
so much,
you can help me.
And they also said, listen, the truth of the matter is you're probably going to get worse even if you keep doing this. And this is your option to do it. And so they sort of scared her, sort of gave her hope. And that was the fear part of it. She stopped coming to our center, went to the other place. We found out she died 3 months later.
No.
And it's really, really sad to hear that, because,
devastating.
You hear, you provide someone with this and you see them flourishing and they give you all the credit, but then they go and then they become fearful. They have this little sliver of hope and everything, and it changes everything. So I'm just saying, if someone were to, was doing something that was absolutely working for you, but even then someone else comes in and adds fear to the equation.
Yes. Yeah.
That is enough to trigger you to make probably a poor decision, I would say. Meaning you had something going, you were, fulfilling something, you were living beyond what, was expected. And yet you made that decision, and that's out of fear. And that's where I think we are, in a sense. We see these people, of course, as experts. And in some ways, I think we shouldn't dismiss everything they say. I think we should question anyone that's in any, profession, if we feel we can. But at the same time, fear is just this incredible emotion that allows us. And once you have that, once someone tells you, hey, if you don't take this drug, you could die. Whoa, I have to take this drug now. What other choice do I have? I'm fearful of dying. And unfortunately, as you've witnessed in your experience, that fear of going on a drug, or hearing that expert tell you that, led to, really dire consequences for you, where you had to suddenly rebuild yourself and in some way recondition your life, which brings me
Yeah.
to, what you're doing now, because you've gone through this long journey in this story and this healing, and it's continuous. I understand that, but you've done what so many patients I love to hear are giving back to others now, are giving their purpose now is to help others. And that's what you're doing. And can you go into that and recondition your life academy and your work right now?
Sure. Yeah. So it was, I mean, that's what I put everything that happened to me was to lead me to this. Absolutely. And it was such a blessing. However much, I went through was to lead me to this, because I always say that, and I use this with clients as well, when they're kind of, and a lot of clients, when they start working with me, are in the victim mentality, which is understandable at the beginning of their journey when they've just been diagnosed with cancer or something awful has happened to them. And I deal with people at all ends of the spectrum, from, violent marriages to cancer to all sorts of things. And so when they're in that victim mentality, I always say you have the opportunity here to reframe this and to look at it as a blessing. And it's really hard to do when you're in the situation. But if you can do that when you're in the situation and know that this is happening for a reason, you will be led to your purpose. And that's absolutely what happened to me. And so now I was within my journey, because I told you it took a decade for me to go into full remission. But during that time, I was getting a lot better and I was learning. I studied nutrition. I, studied so many different things. And so I started writing about natural health. And then after having my kids, natural parenting and all of that, started speaking about it and writing articles, a lot of articles about things like epigenetics. It's a really big passion of mine, because I just think that it's just so important for us to understand that our genes are not our destiny. And, our lifestyles control everything, what we do with our lives physically, but also the mental and physical. And so my journey taught me that, like I said before, it's the mind, body, and spirit, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And if one of those is out of alignment, everything else isn't going to work optimally. And I really learned that. And so that was the understanding, that was the thing that put my work together and enabled me to understand that what I need to offer people is a unique way of being able to heal by conflating all of those. So healing all of those. So even if someone can come to me with an autoimmune disease, or someone can come to me because they are single and they are not manifesting their ideal partner, or someone can come to me because they are not living in their purpose and don't know what career they need to be in. All of it requires healing. All of it requires the same process. We need to go back and heal the inner child. We need to uncover trauma. We need to, uncover limiting beliefs, learn how to reprogram them, learn how to use brain training and neuroplasticity to reprogram those neural pathways in the brain. I do ancestral healing with clients and work with women on their divine feminine, putting them back into their divine feminine, stepping into their purpose. No, there's a massive part of what I do, core essence and purpose. What is your purpose? Repressed emotions. And so the physical side of it ends up being such a small part. I mean, it's a big part as well, the nutrition and the supplements. And I think supplements, by the way, I think that we should be getting everything we can from food, and where we can't, we should supplement. But in a lot of these cases, obviously, these people do need supplements. Plant medicines, the earth has given us everything we need to be able to thrive. And we need to go and find how that fits in with our lives. And an individualized approach is so, so important. So I do that with my private clients, but I also have the Recondition Your Life Academy, which is a group course that I run. It's just for women. And it goes through 12 modules over 12 weeks of everything basically that I've just said and more, to kind of literally recondition your life. My podcast is called Reconditioned. And when I was trying to think of the name for the course, I thought, well, why do I need to do anything else? It does what it says on the tin, that it's reconditioning your life from the inside out. And that is my focus, and that very much is my purpose. And I'm so grateful to be able to be doing it and to be able to be providing people with the tools, because the kind of feedback I get is, so amazing for me. And I'm in gratitude every day that I get to hear this. But it's the kind of feedback that is so rare to hear, it's the kind of feedback you probably get. And, in terms of just literally being able to transform people's lives, because the kind of things you're healing their bodies with are just, they've never experienced it before. And when you go within and you kind of uncover all the trauma and you do all the inner work as well, because your body can't be healthy if your mind and your soul and your spirit are not healthy. And so people are releasing everything that is enabling illness to be present in them. And I'm helping them kind of shift the identity behind the thing that is keeping them in illness. Because often the thing that's keeping us in illness is this identity of I'm a sick person. And the secondary gain as well. I see that a lot. Once people have been ill for so long, it's scary, the concept of being healthy. And if I have to work, and what if I get ill again? I have to go out with people, I have to make arrangements. That's scary. So I work with them a lot on secondary gain and stuff like that. But essentially, it's a whole person approach. And from so far, thank God, it works every time. So, and I'm sure you can attest to that with how you work as well.
Oh, absolutely. Listen, every one of us, I always say this, and people sometimes, when I post on Instagram when I'm getting an IV or something or doing some therapy, they're like, get well soon. Sorry you're sick. It's like, no, I'm not sick, but I am a patient. I do consider myself, because I'm always healing. I'm healing from one little trauma, maybe peeling the onion back from when I was 5 and got bullied or something. And, all those little things. And I want to optimize myself to be the best, the happiest I can be, and healthiest. So I like that idea that it doesn't matter if you're a cancer patient or you're someone going through a divorce or some kind of, emotional trauma. That's still unhealthy in a sense, right? You're still dealing with a health issue. It's not some, you're not truly unhealthy. I have this sickness and you have this. Like, no, it's all the same. Mind, body, spirit. If any one of those is misaligned, you're dealing with an issue that is related to health. And you need to address it at its root cause and looking at the whole, not identifying one little thing and saying, that's all we'll do is look at that and try and fix that. Why is that being caused? Who cares? Let's go at that.
Right,
so
exactly.
I really like that approach. Of course, I can resonate with that approach. It's what we, talk about so much here and what we look at with every single person that walks into our clinic or that I speak with. One of the things I did want to ask you as a parent, as someone that has seen, the damage that a vaccine can do. What are some of the tips and resources you are providing with parents right now that are navigating that with their own children? And going beyond vaccines, I don't want to make this all about that, because there are so many choices as a parent these days to keep a child healthy that go way beyond vaccines, nutrition, it's everything else, how you're raising your child and all the different elements that go along with it. What are some of the tips, recommendation, tools, resources you provide with parents to help them navigate that?
Well, as you and I spoke about before, informed consent. I don't think there's anything more important for us as parents than informed consent. Whatever decision you decide to make, that should come from a place of informed choice. And informed choice doesn't mean going onto the website of the pharmaceutical company who's providing you with the vaccine or the drug, whatever it is you're looking into. It means real research. It means researching, one of my favorite resources is Children's Health Defense, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Del Bigtree, people who have got nothing to gain, who are really get bashed a lot. Those are the people who you want to be taking your advice from, because they've got nothing to gain. They're only here to help and to heal the collective. But really, it comes from informed choice and informed consent. And I always advise people, even before you get pregnant, get your body into a state of homeostasis, get yourself into a good place emotionally. Epigenetically, we pass down through our DNA everything we're carrying when we're, let alone not even when we're pregnant, but when we're conceiving, and what's going on before we've conceived. So the state of your body, mind, and spirit before you even conceive is really important. How you look after yourself when you're pregnant, your emotions, and keeping in a calm state where possible. Obviously, it's not always possible, but a big part of what I do is meditation and kind of a spiritual guidance and spiritual approach. I have an amazing spiritual teacher myself, and that is a huge part of my journey, my growth, my continued growth, my continued learning. And so kind of having some sort of meditation practice in pregnancy, looking after your body. And when you are having the baby and they're coming at you with, the midwife is telling you this and the doctor's telling you need this vaccine and you need to take this drink so we can check your sugar, and we need to, everything that someone wants to put into you, you need to come at that thing from a place of informed consent. Mm-hmm. If you cannot read back what is on that package insert without reading it, word for word, then that is not informed consent. Informed consent is when you go into a doctor's surgery and they ask if you're going to have a vaccine, and you can list to them more ingredients on the package insert than the doctor can list to you. That is informed consent.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, make any choice you feel is right for your family. But if you are not at that place, that is not informed consent. That is always my biggest advice for people. You know, health is a collaborative, holistic venture. And it is not you take one thing and that's it. It's constantly feeding your body with good food, and nourishment doesn't just mean food either. Nourishment is what you're feeding your soul. You know, so I have people who have bad relationships with foods, clients who have a really bad relationship with food. And they're like, I'm trying to do the diet, but da da da. And I said, but no, if you're not, then we need to work on your mind and your spirit more, because if you're eating that food without believing that it's nourishing you, it's not going to nourish you. You could be having kale smoothies and whatever and wheatgrass juice every day, but if it's hurting your soul to be taking it, it's not going to be nourishing you. So, you know, coming at everything from this place of, I guess, just a gratitude for nature and what it can do for your body, a gratitude for your body, a love, a compassion for your body, and just an understanding of everything you're putting in your body and your mind. And I know that might sound a bit abstract. I guess what it comes down to is informed choice, but there are so many ways we can educate ourselves.
Right. But I think it makes real sense to me that understanding your body when combined with informed consent lead to the right decision. So I actually believe absolutely you need informed consent. And, you know, I even go back to the story. I interviewed Naveen Jain, a Viome billionaire out there, and he always said, if you want to get to the truth or really understand a subject, take 10 different sources from all different areas and really, really vary those sources. I mean, one's paid for by the person who's going to profit it. Another one's from someone that hates that person. You know, another one is in the middle somewhere. Another one's a liberal or, this and a conservative viewpoint. Read them all completely open-minded. Not saying that you like or don't like. You're just taking information. There is no good or bad in information. It is just information. Take it all in, sit with it, and then truly understand what resonates with you. What feels good amongst all, because it's probably going to be somewhere a mix of all this different information, but then you are aware, you understand what is going on with this topic and what it could do, and then you are feeling it. And then, of course, you have to sit with it and make that decision yourself and go hear in your heart, not in your head, because that's probably already been corrupted by money, by ads, by everything else, by your friend telling you this is what's best for you. You have to make that. And it's got to really resonate in your heart chakra, in that center of you, not in top of you.
No, I always say to people, if you want answers, sit in the silence.
Yes.
You know, your intuition is such an important thing to follow. And, you know, we really have been blinded and deafened to our intuition by thinking that someone else can give us the answers for us. And we are all made so differently. We can go deep here, and I'm not going to go too deep, but, you know, we've all had past lives as well. And that kind of contributes to what you're going through in this life. Everything is multifaceted, multifactorial. There are different elements. It's not just a case of this person did or didn't do this, and therefore this person died. There is a backstory to everything. And you can only get to your truth, like you say, once you have informed yourself, educated yourself, and then sit in the silence and see what your answer is.
Yeah.
That for me is informed consent.
Absolutely. I agree with that so much. And I think more people need to do that, because I think people rush. They come from a state of fear, of guilt, of all these lower consciousness levels that we know usually don't lead to the best decisions. And I do agree that spirituality plays a big role in all of this, of course, in well-being and health. And I know that you recently spoke with Tommy John, who's somewhat of a controversial figure during this time of the pandemic.
Just a little bit controversial.
Just a little bit. I don't know if Instagram let him back on yet, but
he's back on. He's back on.
But it is a big topic of spiritual awakening during this time. You're seeing, a great polarity in everything. You're seeing a time of great change, of so much going on. I mean, how do you feel about what's happening in the world right now, aside from a virus, a pandemic, but from the spiritual side of everything?
Yeah, it's a really good question. This year and a half has been a major time for me in my own spiritual development, my own spiritual evolution, because as someone that doesn't use the medical model for anything, to see our entire world being controlled by that has been very difficult. So I have spent a lot of time in the silence myself, and spent a lot of time being guided by my spiritual teachers, and coming to the understanding that there are really deeper reasons for why things happen, and sometimes really bad thing, or even bad good, that's binary, in spiritual sense it's not good or bad. They happen sometimes when we need to shift out of something, and a shift can only happen from this place of stagnation when something really tragic or difficult, very challenging happens. And on an individual level, it's the same. I deal with this with my clients. Our rock bottoms, our energetic death and rebirth, is the best place we can be, because then we can see what it's trying to teach us and we can grow from that. Now, I've been seeing this for a while, and spiritual teachers around the world are looking and saying, well, we can see what this is for, but how is it going to play out? How are people going to respond to it? Now, not everyone is going to respond in the way that you and I are responding, but I've come to the acceptance that that's also okay, because that's their spiritual journey and that's part of their spiritual evolution. And I'm no longer frustrated with it. I'm upset and frustrated when people are being harmed by measures that are taken that have, these measures that have really harmed many people in many different ways, and are continuing to do so. That upsets me. But even that is part of a bigger plan to lead us into some sort of, to get a woo-woo awakening, because we can't carry on going how we're going. And so some huge shift needed to take place to wake us up and push us out of this stagnation that we're living in, this stagnation of, yes, sir, we'll do whatever you want, bow down to the authorities. People are waking up, there are more Tommy Johns coming into the world. And, yes, he's super controversial, but we do need people like that to be waking other people up, you listen to him when he speaks, right? People listen when he speaks. And we need more of that, because we all need to wake up and start thinking for ourselves again. Again, back to informed consent. Wherever you are on the spectrum, are you truly thinking for yourself? Are you a sovereign being? Are the decisions you've made in the past year and a half based on what your intuition is guiding you to do? Or are they based on fear? Because fear is never a good place to make decisions from. So yeah, I think that the only thing that has got me through this time is my spiritual practice, and kind of the idea that this is all part of some of our awakening that not everyone will wake up to, but the planet will.
Yeah. No, it really feels like a shift in consciousness and awakening. And that is difficult. Shift is difficult. Change is difficult. Whenever we start with a patient, we always like to say it's probably not going to be pleasant at first.
No.
Your body is changing, but for the better. But always when you shift and move stuff around, think about when you have like a house and you got to do spring cleaning. What's the first thing you do? Make a crazy mess, throw things in piles, move it around. Then you look around and go, my God, this place is worse than when it started. But the truth is, you're just organizing it to clean it all, to make it nice and neat and move it into a higher level of something that will look better in the end. That's always how things work. And I think we're kind of feeling some of those pains. But if you really take a step back and are able to sit in silence, are able to really go inward and not outward, not keep the news on, not get all the notifications always. That's something, I can't really stand anymore, because people always stay in the state of fear and misery almost, addicted.
So you've got to protect your energy.
Absolutely.
You've got to protect your energy. And that's a massive thing. And that's been a massive thing for me this year and a half. There are many things that I haven't agreed with, most things, of all these measures. And I don't play along with it. And I don't listen to the news. Equally, I protect my energy. I'm not going around there screaming about it, because that's not going to protect my energy either. I'm quite open about my views, and I'm happy to give information to anyone who asks for it. But protecting my energy is the most important thing, because there is so much out there that is trying to impact that, and it's trying to kind of infiltrate. But I have got my bioenergy field around me, and nothing negative and nothing that does not serve my higher good is penetrating that. Nothing. And like you say, about moving into this I always say we've got to get comfortable in our discomfort. There is no growth in stagnation. So something's comfortable for you and you're carrying on with that. The likelihood is it's not serving your highest good, and that something has to shift. We only grow when we shift the things that scare us, when we shift out of this comfort that we've got so used to. And it's also, it makes people very uncomfortable. I always say to my clients, I'm not here to make you comfortable. I'm here to help you heal. And I think it's the same with this collective thing that's going on right now. It's not here to make us comfortable. We're not meant to be comfortable right now, because if we're comfortable, we're not going to wake up and shout from the rooftops about why what is happening is wrong. So we have to be in a state of discomfort in order to heal the collective.
Yes, step into the discomfort and uncertainty, and that's how we truly heal. A wonderful message. Where can people learn more about you, work with you, and just connect?
Sure. Well, I'm on Instagram at Lauren Vaknine. And my website is laurenvakninecoaching.com, where you can see about my private coaching and about my academy, which only runs 3 times a year. You can sign up to the waiting list there. We're running it again from August. And yeah, just Instagram is a great place to connect with me. Also my podcast, the Recondition podcast. So that releases every week. Today we just released one with Shaman Direct, talking about all the stuff like the darkness, the matrix. He goes super deep. So it was really interesting.
That is bound to be an amazing one as well. So Lauren, thank you so much. This was really a pleasure connecting with you.
Thank you so much. Such an honor for me. I'm such a fan of the podcast. So thank you so much.
Oh, thanks.